Hello everybody, it is Caleb, and today I'm going to show you a handy little queue list that I made in Touch Designer using a table dat and some scripts. And it's very useful for executing any number of queues over a certain time with different, some of them being follow queues and some of them not being follow queues. Um, and then being able to mix textures together or send and receive data values. It's very useful for doing all that in a scalable way where you can have any number of queues. So let's get started. I want to show you kind of the behavior of this. So I have this queue list table that stores all of our queues, and these here are used to, those are manually entered as our header. So then each of these sections here represents one queue. And then if we zoom into this container, we could find a quick function here. So how this would work is you don't need to specify currently if it's anything except for go. So let's take away some of these follows and we'll see what happens. And I'll show you what happens if we just put in an incorrect word. So far, nothing happens. Bad. So let's hit go. Oh, we need to hit off. Yep. So now is triggered, is on that one. And you can see they step through. Now I've hit the last follow and it didn't go to the next one. So let's go to that one. And then it follows down, and I think I didn't make enough queues. I only made up to queue 8, but it can. Oh, I don't have a queue built out here for this one, so it's not going to hit follow. So the three components to this are the go script, which advances this table, turns on this is triggered, and as soon as is triggered turns on, this dat2 reads that value, and then it goes into a timer. And then as soon as it's done, it hits this follow-up script. And this follow-up script reads the next queue and determines if it says follow or not. And if it says follow, and I'm probably going to make that so that it can say, like, you can just type F as well. But if it says follow, then the next queue fires. So let's get started building this. Okay, I'm going to use this. I'm going to keep this up here. So let's get started with our table. We're going to build a dat and then a table. And we're going to enter in our header manually. So up here we can see we have 6 columns. So let's turn on exact dimensions and then go to 6 columns. And then our rows is going to be the amount of queues that we have minus our header. So we can build up our header, and I'll use this to copy off of just a little bit. We need our queue name for our own use, and we can also do functions with that as well later down the line. We have our trigger, our fade time, our is triggered value, and then our from value and our to value. And these are just going to be integer values. A lot of the times they're just going to be either 0 to 1 or 1 to 0, unless you want to move an actual integer value. So if you do 0 to 1, then you can move things like textures if you set up your nodes correctly. Or you can just output values. So the next component we need, well, let's fill this in just a little bit with some fade times. And then let's set both of these is triggered values to 0 so that it shows as they haven't been triggered. And then let's make one more table above this. And we'll call it, well, let me run up here real quick and increment the names of these so that we can have our thing back. So this is going to be called current queue, and then I'm going to build a table here. It's going to be, so our current queue, we're going to set this at 1, and then we're going to start building scripts to sort of fill all these values in for us. This can go back up here for now. So the first thing we need is a go button and an off button. So let's build those now. We start that by adding in our button, and then that goes out to a null. And then we need, under dat, we need a chop execute. And that chop execute gets linked to this null. So we can call this go null. And then reference that in this section right here under properties. And then let's duplicate this. And then we can call this button go and this button off. And then this becomes our off null. And that is referenced here as well. So what we do next is the only thing we have to do with this button, the first and most important thing is advance the is triggered on the queue we're on to 1. So let's do that now. We can get rid of this. Oh, and then on these chop executes, highlight them, and you have to turn off to on, and then turn value change off. So what we're going to do, and I'm going to reference these numbers directly at first, so you can kind of see the relation. Off to on, we're going to hit enter here, and I can zoom in here a little bit. And we are going to say operator current queue, and then brackets to tell it that we're referencing a cell 0, I can't type today, 0, 0. Now this just gets us the current queue value that we're on. No, and we're trying to tell is triggered here to turn on, or to turn to 1. So we do need to label this as queue list. One second. I thought there was something I forgot to increment. Okay. So this is called queue list, our operator, and then here we call operator queue list, and then we want to address its cell. So we're going to add a bracket here because this number represents 1. So we can put a comma here and then say 3 for our column. So this indicates our row, which is 1, and 3 indicates our column, which is triggered. So let's put a close bracket around this, and then now that we know we're referencing this cell right here, we can say equals 1. That will make that cell 1 when we hit this button. Let's see what happens, and there we go. Now sometimes you'll run into some weird issues sort of referencing values like this, but this time it did work out. And then the other thing we're going to want to do is highlight both of these buttons and turn them to momentary. I'm trying to find a way to work this out. I feel like it helps some people kind of understand, but I'm not sure. So next thing we need to do is After this gets triggered, we can start building out our cuestack, but I want a way to reset these first so we're not punching in things manually. So let's go to this off function here and expand this a little bit. And then the first thing we're going to do is in our off to on, we're going to say current queue. We're going to increment this later. I just want to get this command in now. Operator current queue brackets 0, 0, and that equals 1 again. So as soon as we off this queue, it will reset it to 1. That, and we need to create a for loop for all of our queues, because we're not going to know how many queues we have. So we're going to say for I in range, and then parentheses 1, which means we start at row 1, or we start at our number 1, and then comma, and then we say operator queuelist dot num rows. So now we have a function that increments an integer from 1 to the number of rows in queuelist, which right now is 2, but that will go up. What we want to do is say scroll through this, and for every number you see, do this. Operator queuelist, close that, cell I for the number, because I represents our number that's going to scroll up to the num rows. So I, comma, 3 equals 0. This should make all of our is triggered equal to 0 again. Let's add a value here and then see if that works. Yes, it did work. So then the next thing we need to add, just to kind of complete our thought train over here, is increment current queue with every time we hit go. So to do that, we are simply going to say operator current queue, close the parentheses, brackets, cell 0, 0, and then we can copy this. So this is going to be equal to this plus 1. And this does need to be, yes, this does need to come after this line. Otherwise, you'll increment it and then trigger the next queue. So let's go with this, and we can see that it is incrementing it, but it's not getting us past our current maximum. So let's reset this and then kind of tell it that it's good, and it's going to keep showing us this error message for a bit because it's scared. Okay, so now that we have that, we can see now it goes away. We can right click out of here. Let's save real quick. And then we can right click out of here and give this a dat2. And now we start building into our function up here. So our dat2 is going to contain all of the information from this. Let's give this a from val. So let's say it goes from 0 to 10. And then it goes back from 10 to 5. What we are going to do is on our data2, output channels per value so that it looks like that. And then under select rows, we are just going to say that this is row 1. And then you can copy this parameter to here by dragging you put your cursor over this text and then drag it onto this lower box under the end row index. Reference it, and that says me.par, which means my parameter row index start. So now you just have to change this, and you don't have to change both. Useful when you start adding a bunch of queues. So we have our dat2, and then I want to go to a rename. And this is where we're going to kind of start our function. So I like to add an annotate box when we're starting a function. And it just keeps it organized. So seeing this, we see that we already need to add an input here. So there is our input. Call it dat row. And then this goes to a rename. So I like to drag this over here so we can see. And then our rename is going to go from star all. That's what that means. Star is all. We don't need our row 0, and it actually rules it out anyway. It only gives us 5 parameters here. So let's say our parameters are trigger, fade, is triggered, from val, and to val. And those are our most important parameters right now. We can bring this back, and then we need to bring in our timer that is sort of going to rule this whole operation. Well, rule each queue. So everybody answers to this timer. Start. If I hit start here, this is what it's going to do. It's going to go its 10 seconds and then say done, like a microwave. And then initialize resets it. So our is triggered value here is what's going to be used for this start. But I don't want to reference it, even though I want to show you that we can, because if you duplicate both of these, from what I understand, yeah, it will still be referencing this one up here. But if we undo that and then go to a select chop, select our is triggered value, and then run that into our start trigger, which is our lower one. Now if we duplicate this, it will keep its correspondence. So when we add Q2, this won't be triggered off of Q1. We can also do that with our off here, but what we need to do is run an input. And then let's call this off in, and then for our naming convention, I want to say that is an input. And this will be Q1, and then when we increment this, it will actually increment it to Q2, which is nice. So now we have our is triggered value here, driving this value, driving this start. Now we need to off it. So let's wire this to our off, and then let's wire our off to our off input. Now when we push this button, it will start. So we can see now it's running, now it's off. The next thing we need is our value. So we have our from value and to value. So let's bring in a math chop. And then we can, instead of selecting our timer or our is triggered value, let's not right click off that. Let's just duplicate this one. Control C, Control V. And then our channel name, backspace, is going to be I'm sorry, it's not off of here. It's off of here. So you can right click, select, and then we're going to select the channel timer function. This is a 0 to 1 ratio of how far we are in relation to our length time. So if this were set to our proper fade time here of 2 seconds, this would go much faster. I'll show you that in 1 second though. What I want to do is get our timer, and then from here, here's what I wanted to get. This can be done twice, and then we need our from value and our to value. And then those all get used on our math chop here. The timer fraction will go straight in as our value, and then our from val and to val will get exported to here. From value and to value. So now our is triggered value will trigger this, which will increment this timer fraction 0 to 1, which will drive our from value and to value to here. And I'll show you how to do that with textures later, but let's get this to our follow-up script. The last step in here, if we can scroll into these, you can see we're almost done. So the last step is to get its done value, and that comes from the timer. So we can find this select chop, duplicate it, and then maybe store that up here so we don't get our wires confused. And then this is going to be channel name done. Once done is triggered, this will serve as a null chop, and we can actually export this to a null. This will trigger our follow-up queue. Our follow-up queue, I kind of forget it. So let's go over here. And we'll double click and build a chop execute. And then we will link it to null done. Once we have that, turn on off to on, turn off value change. And then here's what we are going to say. When it turns from off to on, you are going to get our current queue. Our current queue is found here. So we are going to say current queue equals, operator current queue brackets 0, 0. Now I want to show something real quick. Obviously right now we haven't started and we're on Q1. If I hit go, we are technically on Q1. This technically indicates the next queue that we're going to fire. That's what I meant by current queue. So it's a little bit misleading. I might fix it, but I'm going to have 3 scripts to reference if I do. Which is fine, it isn't too much. Let's go ahead and keep calling it current queue. We just have to remember that current queue is the queue that is on standby. That's what I mean. Then maybe that's a more appropriate name, is standby. In fact, yeah, that looks much better. I'm going to do that. Because I did have a need for a current queue before. And you can do this if you want, or you could just keep calling it current queue. Okay, that should be all of the scripts. So our standby queue is the queue that we are waiting on. That is going to be the queue that we read if it's follow or not. So what we're going to say now is operator queue list. I want you to access the cell at coordinates standby queue, comma 3. No, it's 2 because it is trigger 2. Once we have done that, I need to do something with this. My bad. Okay, so we are reading our trigger. What we're going to say is if our trigger equals follow, and we will have to type it in like this, but at the end of this video, I'm going to add some options to that. So if this equals the word follow, we are going to do this action. Operator queue list, and remember the only thing we're waiting on for our next queue to go is our is triggered value to be set to 1. So we're going to say operator queue list brackets standby queue, comma 3, which is triggered, yes, you're going to set that to 1. And then we also need to advance our queue. So basically everything that this script does, we also have to do. I would like to make it so that this simply fires this go command. And there might be a way to do it, but I would have to turn this null to up and then back down, which shouldn't be too difficult. There we go. So we can see that it checked the condition of this cell and then went ahead and advanced this queue and then advanced our standby queue to 3. So now if we hit go again, it's going to go Q3. So this is great. We're almost done with our function here. What I want to do is send these to output nodes. So because I'm kind of open developing with this, I'm going to put a couple different outs that I might not really use. Our first most important one, though, is our value out. And then that is going to run from our rename. And that's going to be the value that we're pushing. The next value I'm going to output is our done value. And so if we wanted to, we can kind of create our own language once this is done. And then if I'm going to output our trigger value, I also want to output the trigger fraction coming from right here. And what that'll do is let us blend like textures together. So this value might not be doing anything. Or the value might have to drive something else, and then this will work as an auxiliary. Either way, I just want to output it. Then I don't think there is any more values. However, if I'm getting this information, I might as well get the fade time just in case I have to pass that to something else. Alright, so now that this is done, so this is an equivalent of what I'm trying to make here, and this is what worked in another in another file for another project. So we have our break search words here, which are these words. So it'll compare everything it sees against these words. And then our ward search words look like this. And our pre-show search words to determine if we're in pre-show or not will look like this. And then those are the variables we set. And then the function is if studio field, which is one of the columns, so that studios would normally appear in. But if that says, if the words in there include break search words, then this is our output function. Then I have another function here actually that I might as well show you. I didn't realize that this used that function. So this comes before the function, and I know it's kind of a lot. But basically what this does is, let's say our studio column, let's say our column that we're searching says dance works of lighting land. Then what it'll do is set, I don't exactly know what happens here, I won't lie. And by the way, above here, we say this. So this is our current studio value. So we set A to this entire phrase, and that's just one string. And then what we do is A then appears here, and we set a new variable, A words equals find all, whatever this mumbo jumbo means. But the output from that is that if you were to output this back to a table, let's say all of these indicated new columns, it would look like this. So what you'd have is an array of words. Then if it has an array of words, it can search all of these. Oh, so what this does is it joins them back together to be a title. But then I use A words down here to search for things. So I want to scan all of the words in this column for one or more words. So now I'm comparing an array of words against an array of words. We're not going to be doing that though. I'll leave a link just because. But we're going to be doing something more like this. So let's go in here and say what are we doing? Follow words equals open brackets. So we're going to include what we're going to do is lowercase them so that we can enter it in lowercase. Follow. We're going to include F. Just for safety, because we're here, we'll include a capital F, but I don't think we're going to need it. And then let's just put the abbreviation in follow. Let's add some typos. and this is going to be quite a few, so I won't make this that extensive. But you can see what I'm doing. I'm just kind of making a bunch of words. And then we have to end that with a close bracket, assuming I don't twitch. So now we have a whole bunch of words that could be follow. So now what we need to do is say this. And I'll bring this a little closer. Here we go. So what I want to do as well is start making some of these into variables. So our QList is going to be equal to operator QList, and then we can copy this and make our code a little bit cleaner. So if QList standby Q, that's fine, because here if we have our target. So this will be, let's add some spaces here so we can see. So this would be in, and then instead of saying follow, we'll say follow words. So here, let me turn on highlight again on this. So if that's good, come on, stay in viewer mode. Studio field is our target. QList standby Q1 is our target. In break search words, in follow words, we need to end it with a colon. This should work. Let's give it a try. And I'm gonna, I'll need to reduce the fade time. It's only 2 seconds. Okay, didn't seem to go. Oh, because I have to lower it. So notice I put all of these in lowercase. So what I'm going to do before that is say this is where I normally use ChatGPT, but I'm trying to power through this. For I in follow words. What are the oh, from and then to. So we don't have any arguments. For I in words. Or you know what we can do? Instead of changing, yeah, this is not the right approach. I think it would be that. If target dot lowercase. Let's try this. See, it gives an error. I'm going to lower this to a much lower fade time. Yep, gave an error. Has no attribute lower. Let's try that. So now it'll read the value. Did that work? It did. Yes, okay. So now we have a working function here that says if our target in lowercase, so you could put it in whatever case you want, appears in these words, follow words, then it'll do that. So let's try setting a couple more rows and give it some values. Oh, I'm doing that manually. and then give it more fade times. And here's what I'm going to do. This is going to be follow, follow, F, whoops. I think I added FLW as one in there. All right, so it just absolute chaos here. Our trigger column is never going to look like that, but I just want to test all of these. And did I add FLW in here? Yeah, I did. So this should still go through all of these. Oh, you know what, though? I don't have any follow-up scripts. Now that this script is done, though, let's go ahead and wrap this up. So we will build a container. I like to make it a little bigger. We have our inputs and outputs. So let's save, and then we can drag all of this into our container. I think when I do this, it only grabs the annotate box. Nope, it grabbed this. And I expected this one issue here. And then we're also going to have to change some things here now that we put it into a container. Trust me, it's easier though than trying to duplicate all these. What we have to do, let's plug in our DATs. Our DAT row in. Sometimes you have to drag from the function out. And then our off. Let's do that as well. This should be functioning now, except for this. So it doesn't know what QList is. The reason it doesn't know is because you see this. Oh, that was weird. But anyway, you see this project path up here. Right now we are in container 1. If we scroll out of here, we are just in our project 1. If we scroll out of this, we're in our root folder, as it's called. So what we need to do is we're referencing standby queue and QList. And both of those are no longer in this same directory. So we have to add on the variable here, op, within the quotations, believe it's slash, and then the name of your project. And in most cases, it's project 1, as evident here. I later learned that in any file, you can click on the operator and open properties, and then press this information button, and this name here is what you would enter for exporting. So if I went into a container, so function in, you could go in here and now see that this project path has changed to project 1, container 1, displace 1. That's it. Back to the video. So that sets our queue list, and then let's go ahead and set our standby queue variable. Just so we can call this queue done. Okay. And this should still work. And then we need to reference this out of this container here. So this should work now. Let's off it. We have an error. Cannot find function name off to on. What? Oh, it didn't even get that far. And that's why I added a minus sign. Let's try this now. Nope. What now? Standby queue reference before assignment. Standby queue is not defined. Op project 1. So let me see what this format was here. / Did I do the right direction? Yeah. Op project 1 standby queue, and that's called standby queue. So let me think about this. Yeah, I'm defining it right there. Sometimes it just like requires an update, but probably not. See? It cleared that variable. Oh, standby queue. Still not happy. Okay, standby queue. There's no typos there. Standby queue. Let's just try putting this in directly. And sometimes it does weird things like that. No? Oh well, it did get further. Cell is not subscriptable. And then I found this error is often cleared by referencing it directly. Why? I don't know. That's not how variables are supposed to work. But that's why I like developing it, addressing it directly first, so we can kind of weed those out. Interesting. Let's see. It has some news for us. Not int. It's a string. Line 12. It's not a string. If we go out of standby queue, this isn't a string, it's an integer. I did not have this issue on the last one. Let's just try dumb things that have worked in the past. Oh, that worked even worse. What did I do here? It looks the same. Oh. Well, that could cause a problem. So the only difference here is that we assign a new variable to here. Whereas in this one, I'm making standby queue an operator, and then I'm changing it to an integer. So let's try. I didn't want to just paste it in because I wanted to see what was going on. Oh, let's do this. Standby queue, and then we'll change this to standby queue op. So then this changes to op. This changes to op. And that should be it. So if queue list, this number lower, queue list, this number, same reference. This would be, oh, I see a problem here. We're just adding up two operators. So then we need to say, not that, we need to say standby queue op 0, 0 equals standby queue op 0, 0 plus 1. Still. Line 9. None type appears on 9. Queue list. Queue list is still an operator. Oh, I see. Standby queue. Right. I'm putting an operator in here. My bad. If queue list standby, so both of these are integer values now. Then standby queue up 0, 0 is standby queue up plus 1. There we go. Now this next one should go, oh, it would go in 10 seconds if we added a new queue for it. So this executed fine. Let's save, and then we'll call this container. Oh, we can't do that. Okay. And then, now here's what we can do to make this even a little cleaner. Let's put this. Do we really need that? Yeah, we do, because this selects it. So let's put this, I'm hitting Control X. Let's put this inside here. Now that we know how to reference outside, we'll make this dat_in project1 queue list. Okay, and now all we need to do, we need to pass this in, and then our input suddenly just becomes our queue number. So let's feed that a value. This is going to be a constant value. So now we don't have to add a new dat row every time. This is going to be called our queue number. And this one's going to be set to 1. So then when we pass in a 1 here, we can simply pass this value off to our start row index, and then this copies that over as well. So now this doesn't have to live outside. It can live inside the container, and we can just increment this value. And I'm sure there's a way we can automate that incrementation as well. So let's go ahead and copy this V, and let's add a good amount of queues. And then what I want to do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2. Well, I'll see what it's complaining about in a second. What I want to do is select all of these and then say common clone master Q1. And now all of these will read from container Q1. And then all we have to do is increment these. So this one's Q2. This one's Q3. Q4. 5. 6. And 7. And then if we go over here to Q7, we can see that we do in fact have something for it. So that's good. I want to see what it's not happy about. And lo and behold, none type. Let's try just running it and see what happens. Yep, so it seemed to clear the errors as I kind of went, except for this. It's all the same error, but they all seemed to go. Here's what I want to do. Where's our value in here? I do want to sort these. So our value is the most important. Our timer fraction is our second most important. Our value out. No, this is our done out. That's our third most important. And then our fade time is our least important. So I want to go make a null on all of these. And I'm going to give them at least a 2-second fade time to make sure. So off, then go. So even the ones that have an error, oh, now they clear. So they all went. I'm trying to get that last one to clear out. Huh. Oh, you know what though? It is right. Because it's now, that last one will show an error for the time being. I can add I can fix that in a second, but what it's doing is it's trying to reach Q8, and there is no Q8. So let's add, this would actually be a good function for this queue as a whole to indicate when the entire queue stack is done. So let's make this last one output something different. We're going to have to add an error in here. And here's when I'm going to go to ChatGPT. And I'll just show you guys kind of how I come up with 90% of this code. So you just take your function, paste it in. And then you say, I have here a script that, what does it do? Oh, yeah. Checks the next queue's trigger column to see if it is set to follow. If it is, it advances the queue. And I think I know this. Get to expect an error on the last function's usage where there is no queue. Can you rewrite this so that if there is no content in and then it should do it. Except type error. And it might be a value error, but that's what I was looking for. So let's just copy this and give it a try. I found, by the way, when pasting from ChatGPT, so these have tabs. These probably have, oh no, they have tabs now. I guess it updated. It used to be that if you put in tabs, it would spit out spaces. So let's try that line. We're still given a value. So what is the error? Attribute error. So let's just change this to attribute error. So now if it gets an attribute error, it'll pass. Nice. No errors. And then what we can do is output the done, because all of this is going to go into a big function. Output the done and say QList done out. Hey everybody, so I did some experimenting, and it is possible to move this entire cuestack into a container of its own, but there is a couple settings and codes that you have to tweak. The first is this. So first off, on your container, turn enable cloning off. You can still have the clone master turned on, and then let's try it right now. If I make a change in here, it shouldn't track over to this, correct? So you don't want to have enable cloning on. Otherwise, once you get this set, if you make a change to this one, it will track up back on and copy over this one's settings, and you'll have to reset this one up. So then the other thing, when you're scrolling in, this code, I changed it to actually work now. So I do need to add some variables to this, I'm aware. But if operator standby queue, which is this, is less than or equal to the number of rows in queue list minus 1, then it can operate these two lines as before. Else it just passes. So with that, this will get up to 8, but then it won't execute that line. It will just stop. The other settings that have to be changed are inside this container, this first container here. And you have to go to this dat and change this reference here. And you have to change this reference to both match the container that this all is in. And what you're actually matching here when you do that is, where is it? This is the input. What you're referencing is QList, and you're referencing this name. Once you reference that name exactly, then it is a reference. But until you do that, it's going to break the reference and just carry the old values. So when you duplicate your container, your big QList, and create a second QList, these are the two settings you're going to have to change. Container 10, and then, well, sorry, not container 10, but you're going to have to change this DAT's DAT reference. You don't have to touch this. And then you have to change this QList reference right here. Note that I also referenced this, but I don't think that's correct right now. Oh, wait, no, it is. No, it's not. So, I'm willing to bet I don't need that. Well, I'm going to keep that there and let you guys copy that. And then I also put this in here. And that is it for references. Again, there's no project references in these codes here. So that should conclude the video. Thanks. If you want to see more like this, give this channel a subscribe and turn on that notifications bell so that you can see when new videos come in. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you later. Is run these into a switch. So because you have all these values here, now in like a lighting console, they would all be controlling different fixtures. But here we just have this one value. So let me just go over a couple different applications of this. If you wanted to add all these together, not add them, but switch on and off of them, it would look like this. You would go from your output to a switch chop, and then run all of these Q's outputs in order. From there, you would pull your standby Q, and you can do that pretty directly by simply bringing it over, optionally, and then exporting. Oh, I can't do that anymore. You might have luck with that. I used to. Exporting this. So operator standby Q. And that is going to be 0, 0. So now we have our current Q. Oh, wait. It needs to be, I remember this from last night. It needs to be -2. Here's why. Because when we're in standby, this is 1. This says 1. Well, if you switch it to index 1, it's going to go to this one, out 2. And it's going to take that value. Like, let's take it off. I'll show you. It's going to go to out 2's value. Starting Q's value is this QList start value. From here, I can display this. And then we can see that when we go, it will pull from each Q. Now, let's say we wanted to do something different and have these control textures. That would look like this. It's a simple little trick I found. Let's do movie file in. And then let's take a second movie file. Why do I have butterflies on here? Oh, this is the sample. Okay, I like that. So then what we're going to do is let's take just one of these 0 to 1 values. Let's actually make this cuestack a little bit more presentable for this. So we're going to start on our input 0, and we're going to go to input 1. We're going to stay there for 3 seconds. This is going to happen over 2 seconds. Let's actually see it. 4 seconds, and then it's going to stay there for 3 seconds, and then it's going to go back to 0. And then it's actually going to do that again. And then it'll go back up to end. So we have this value, and it's going to keep switching back and forth from 0 to 1 in the time that we specify. And we want to be able to edit those numbers on the fly without having to dig into chops. So what we're going to do is we should have kept the switch here. Okay. So then what we're going to do is if this goes from 0 to 1, we have that. Then we just need a range to say 1 to 0. So you just be opposite of that. So this will always be opposite of this value. Then what we're going to do is multiply each of these by a constant value and then the alpha layer of this constant value is going to drive the output. So if we drop our alpha layer, we're going to have no output. So let's derive that alpha layer from these values. So now one image will always be opposite of the other, and then we can layer these over each other. Now the difference between this and using a switch is that a switch will abruptly change. So this will fade between the two. So once we have that, let's reverse these so that the wider resolution hang on. Okay, so I did this, I wired this backwards. You're going to want to wire your actual movie texture into the bottom so that it preserves its resolution. And then I'm going to plug the wider of these two in here. And so, oh, this still needs to be exported. And so now we can run kind of a null output. And then we'll see that when we hit go, it'll fade to this. And then fade back and forth in the timeline that we set. So if we set more numbers to this, we can have it follow a slightly different timeline. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I think this gets you far enough that past this point would probably be irrelevant for your project. But I wanted to show you guys this component because I thought it was pretty neat. Um, and I got into a very green mess of chops to try to get to where I was, and it just ended up honestly glitchy. Like some of the outputs weren't triggering each other. So that's it. Thanks everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Look forward to chatting with you guys later. Feel free to message me on any of the links that I provide. And yeah, talk to you guys later. Bye.